Hey, how's it going there, chemistry student? Welcome to lesson 2.3. 2.3 says this: I can convert pressures in mmHg, that means millimeters of mercury, to pressures in atm or psi. If we look at our descriptor list, we're about halfway through the unit. Here we are, 2.3 on the list. Let's toggle back to the notepad and let's get the lesson started. So I went ahead and I copied a definition from Google so we could give pressure a formal definition. Here's how Google defines it. 1. Continuous physical force exerted on or against an object by something in contact with it. To your right here, you'll find a graphic. And in this graphic, we have gas particles moving. As we see, they have little whooshies at the end of them, so there's obvious motions. And remember, pressure is exerted when one of these gas particles ricochets on the wall of the container. So whether this is a balloon, a tire, or even a square box, as long as it's sealed shut, particles will impact the side of the container. And these arrows are a force vector showing you that the gas particles are pushing outwards from the inside of the container. And when we get an accumulation of these impacts or ricochets, something called pressure is formed. Let's now go ahead and move over to YouTube, where we have a graphical model of a basketball with gas particles. Here we go. So this basketball is filled with gas particles. We see that they're obviously moving on the inside. And notice that these particles are ricocheting off the sides of the container. This is what gives a basketball pressure. Here we have a pressure gauge, and notice as we add air particles, the ricochets increase. We get more impacts, and the basketball gets larger and larger. Eventually, if we have too much pressure in the basketball, what should happen? Basketball's going to pop and pressure will release, and we have a deflated basketball. Let's head back to the notepad, talk about some common names and units for pressures, and do some math problems off of those units. Over to your left, you'll see a graphic of common air pressures. And basically, these are different languages for saying the same thing. The same way you could say hi in 5 different languages, we can read pressures through different units, but they can all eventually say the same thing. Notice that all of the air pressures in the table were taken at sea level, and that even though, again, all these numbers are different, we can say that each one of these pressures are exactly equal to one another. Now we'll take our highlighter and we're going to highlight the pressure relationships that we specifically have to know for chemistry class. So something we'll have to definitely know is the atmosphere. There's that number. We'll definitely have to know millimeters of mercury. There's that number. Torr, believe it or not, is the same thing as millimeters of mercury. So we'll need to know that one. And then pounds per square inch PSI, we'll need to know that one also. Again, please notice that the numbers for torr and millimeters of mercury happen to be the same thing. They are synonyms of one another. Let's go ahead and write the exact pressure relationship into our notebooks that we're going to need to know for chemistry class. And here it goes. 1 atm is going to be equal to 760 millimeters of mercury, or torr. Remember, those are the same things. And that is going to be equal to 14.7 pounds per square inch. That's what PSI stands for. If we want to be very specific, we'll even add that all of these measurements were taken at sea level. Now let's turn our attention to the right side of the screen. There are 3 example problems for us to try, and we're going to go ahead and take care of problem 1. Here's what it says. Convert 100 torr to PSI. So what I'm going to have to do is set up a proportion with information that I do know relate it to the information I'm trying to find, cross multiply, and then solve for x. As I look at our pressure relationships, something I do know is that 760 torr is equivalent to 14.7 psi. So this is what we're going to use to write our first fraction. So we should have 760 torr divided by 14.7 psi. We're going to set this equal to 100 torr. And we're going to divide this by x because x is the missing psi that we're going to be looking for here in just a second. Let's go ahead, cross multiply, and solve for x. So we're going to multiply these two numbers, and we're going to multiply these two numbers. 760 times x is going to be one side. This is going to equal 100 times 14.7. Now we'll need our calculator to start multiplying some numbers. So let's do the right side first. 100 times 14.7 is equal to 1,470. Let's go ahead, let's erase this and rewrite it. So 1,470. And now to solve for x, all we have to do is divide by 760. Divided by 760. Now we need our calculator one more time to solve the right side here. So I'm going to divide 1,470 by 760. And what I do get is 1.93 psi. And this would be my final answer. Remember, psi is what we were looking for, and psi is what we get as our final answer. Let's go ahead now and try example number 2. It says, convert 1.5 ATMs to millimeters of mercury. And remember, I want to start with the relationship I know. So I see they gave us ATMs and millimeters of mercury. So what I see here in my pressure relationship is that 1 ATM is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. So that's what I'm going to have to start with. Here's what my first fraction is going to look like. 1 ATM divided by 760 mmHg. And now I have to set up the second half of the proportion. So remember, I always want units across to match as a reminder. So at the top, we're going to write down our 1.5 ATM. And then remember, we're looking for millimeters of mercury. So at the bottom here, we're going to put in an X. Let's cross multiply. And what we're going to get is 1 times X is equal to 760 times 1.5. And notice that this problem to solve for x is going to be very easy. 1 is multiplied by x, so that means that this side is simply going to be x. So let's go ahead and erase that. Just put in an x. And all we have to do is multiply 760 by 1.5. Let's go ahead and do that. 760 times 1.5. X is equal to 1,140. And what are our units? We're looking for millimeters of mercury. That's what we're going to include. Millimeters of mercury. And here's answer number 2. The last problem states this: convert 20 psi to ATM. At this point in time, I'd like you to pause the video. Please set up the proportion, cross multiply, solve for x, and as soon as you unpause the video, my work will appear and we'll discuss what we should have come up with. So hopefully you've completed the problem on your own, and now we're going to go over the steps. So this was roughly a 3-step problem, and here's what it should look like. So convert 20 psi to ATMs. So I need to check that relationship first. 1 ATM is equal to 14.7 psi. I put 14.7 in the numerator, 1 ATM in the denominator. I set this equal to 20 psi. Remember, the units across have to stay the same. I'll be solving for ATMs in the bottom here, and I put an X because that's what I want to convert to. Now what I did is I cross multiplied. So the first side is X times 14.7. The other side is 1 times 20 psi. 1 times 20 will just give us 20. And then to isolate X, all I did was I divided by 14.7 on both sides. And then notice that's how I get 20 divided by 14.7. When we do this math in our calculators, what we're going to get is 1.36 ATMs. Thank you for making it to the end here. That will conclude our video. And as always, please have a great day.